The soldier who lost his leg in combat became the doctor who saved his wounded brothers. But when his childhood friend arrived bleeding on his operating table, everything changed. Dr. James Mitchell adjusted his prosthetic leg beneath his surgical scrubs as he prepared for another shift at Walter Reed Medical Center. The advanced titanium limb had become second nature after 10 years, but the phantom pain still reminded him daily of that fateful morning in Afghanistan. At 34, he was one of the youngest trauma surgeons in the military hospital system, specializing in combat injuries, the very wounds that had once nearly claimed his own life. The irony wasn't lost on him. The IED blast that had shattered his right leg below the knee had also shattered his dreams of a full military career, but it had given birth to something else entirely, a burning desire to heal the warriors who came home broken, just as he had. James glanced at the photos on his office desk before heading to the trauma bay. There was his graduation picture from Johns Hopkins Medical School, where he had fought through years of physical therapy and academic pressure to earn his degree. Next to it sat a faded photograph from basic training. 12 young faces full of hope and patriotism, unaware of the battles that lay ahead. He recognized every face, remembered every name, and knew the fate of each one. 3 had never made it home. 4 had returned with invisible wounds that cut deeper than any shrapnel. 2 had struggled with addiction and homelessness. 1 had built a successful life in civilian business. And then there was Tommy Rodriguez. Tommy had been James's best friend since childhood, growing up in the same working-class neighborhood of Detroit. They had enlisted together, trained together, and deployed together. Tommy had been the one to drag James to safety when that roadside bomb exploded, losing 2 fingers from his left hand in the process. While James fought for his life in a German medical facility, Tommy had completed his tour and returned home to silence and nightmares. The trauma bay intercom crackled to life. Incoming, multiple GSWs, ETA 3 minutes. Dr. Mitchell to Trauma 1. James moved with practiced efficiency, his prosthetic leg carrying him as smoothly as any natural limb. Years of physical therapy and determination had made him one of the most agile surgeons in the facility. He had learned to turn his disability into an advantage. Patients trusted him instantly, knowing he understood their pain in ways other doctors couldn't. The automatic doors burst open as paramedics rushed in with their patient. Multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen, the lead paramedic shouted over the chaos. Vitals are dropping fast. Lost consciousness twice en route. James moved to the head of the gurney, ready to take charge, when he froze. The blood-covered face beneath the oxygen mask was one he would recognize anywhere, even after 8 years of separation. Tommy Rodriguez lay dying before him, his dark hair now streaked with grey, his once powerful frame reduced by years of hard living and harder choices. "What's his name?" James asked, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. "Thomas Rodriguez, age 34. Found in an alley downtown. Looks like a robbery gone wrong." James's mind raced through the possibilities. Tommy had struggled after returning from Afghanistan, cycling through jobs and relationships, battling PTSD and survivor's guilt. Like too many veterans, he had fallen through the cracks of a system that promised support, but often delivered bureaucracy instead. "Let's move him to OR3, James commanded, his medical training overriding his personal shock. "I need 2 units of O-negative stat. Prepare for emergency surgery." As they wheeled Tommy toward the operating room, James caught a glimpse of the tattoo on his friend's forearm. The same unit insignia they both wore, the same symbol of brotherhood that had bound them together in the desert heat of Afghanistan. Below it, in faded ink, were the words, "No one left behind." The next 4 hours became the longest of James's medical career. Tommy's injuries were severe. One bullet had nicked his liver, another had punctured his lung, and internal bleeding was threatening to shut down his kidneys. But James had operated on worse cases, had pulled soldiers back from the brink of death when all hope seemed lost. What made this different was the flood of memories that accompanied each incision, each suture, each life-saving decision. As his hands worked to repair the damage, his mind traveled back to their shared past. He remembered Tommy at age 8, standing up to the neighborhood bullies who had been picking on James for his thick glasses and bookish nature. "You mess with him, you mess with me," Tommy had declared. All 90 pounds of him facing down kids twice his size. He remembered their high school graduation, when Tommy had been recruited by 3 different colleges for football scholarships, but had chosen to enlist instead. "College will always be there," he had said, "but right now, our country needs us." He remembered their first day of basic training, when Tommy had helped him through the brutal physical demands, never showing impatience when James struggled to keep up. "We're in this together, hermano," Tommy had whispered during their first 20-mile march. "Brothers to the end." And he remembered that terrible morning when everything changed. The convoy had been routine, a supply run to a forward operating base that they had completed dozens of times before. James had been riding shotgun in the lead vehicle when the world exploded in a flash of heat and flying metal. Through the ringing in his ears and the burning pain in his leg, he had heard Tommy screaming his name, felt strong hands dragging him to safety while bullets whistled overhead. Tommy had saved his life that day, sacrificing 2 fingers to pull James from the wreckage before the fuel tank exploded. And now, 8 years later, James held Tommy's life in his hands. "Doctor, his pressure's dropping again," the attending nurse announced. "We're losing him." James looked at the monitors, at the steady decline of vital signs that he had seen too many times before. But this wasn't just another patient. This was Tommy, the brother who had never left him behind. "Not on my watch," James muttered, his hands moving with renewed precision. He had spent years learning to channel his pain into purpose, his trauma into healing. Every technique he had mastered, every procedure he had perfected, had been leading to this moment. The surgery stretched deep into the night. James repaired the liver damage, reinflated the punctured lung, and stopped the internal bleeding that had been slowly draining Tommy's life away. His surgical team worked in perfect harmony, understanding that their usually calm and collected chief was fighting a battle that went beyond medicine. Finally, at 3:47 a.m., Tommy's vital signs stabilized. The immediate crisis had passed, but the next 48 hours would be critical. James sat beside his friend's bed in the ICU, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor that confirmed Tommy was still fighting. During those long hours, James learned more about Tommy's journey since Afghanistan. The attending social worker filled him in on the police report. Tommy had been living in a homeless shelter downtown, struggling with alcoholism and untreated PTSD. The shooting appeared to be random. Wrong place, wrong time. Caught in the crossfire of a drug deal gone bad. He's been in and out of VA programs for years, the social worker explained. Hasn't been able to hold steady employment or housing. Classic case of a veteran who never fully came home from the war. James felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. The survivor's guilt that had driven him through medical school, through countless surgeries, through every patient he had saved. While he had channeled his trauma into purpose, Tommy had been drowning in his. On the second day, Tommy's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded his features as he tried to process his surroundings. Then his gaze focused on James, sitting in the chair beside his bed, and recognition dawned. "Jimmy." Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. "Is that really you, man?" James leaned forward, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Hey there, hero. You gave us quite a scare." Tommy tried to sit up but winced at the pain. "What are you doing here? Last I heard you were..." "Wait." His eyes took in James's surgical scrubs, the stethoscope around his neck, the confident bearing of a man who had found his calling. "You're a doctor?" "Trauma surgeon, actually. Specializing in combat injuries." James gestured to his prosthetic leg. "Turns out losing a leg was the best thing that ever happened to me. It led me here, to this moment, to saving your stubborn life." Tommy's eyes filled with tears. "I should have stayed in touch. I wanted to, but after what happened over there, I couldn't face anyone, especially you." "What are you talking about?" "You saved my life, Tommy. You're the reason I'm sitting here today. And I'm the reason you lost your leg." Tommy's voice broke. "I was supposed to check that road. I was supposed to spot the IED. If I had done my job right, you never would have been hurt." The weight of 8 years of guilt and misunderstanding settled between them. James realized that while he had been carrying survivor's guilt, Tommy had been drowning in a different kind of burden entirely. "Listen to me," James said firmly. "That IED was buried deep and disguised perfectly. A dozen soldiers had driven over that same spot in the weeks before. It wasn't your fault. And even if it was, you more than made up for it by pulling me out of that wreck. But your leg. My leg led me to become who I was meant to be. Every patient I save, every life I put back together, it's all because of what happened that day. You didn't take anything from me, Tommy. You gave me everything." Over the next week, as Tommy recovered from his surgery, the two friends began to rebuild their connection. James learned about the darkness Tommy had faced, the nightmares that never ended, the jobs lost to flashbacks and panic attacks, the relationships destroyed by emotional walls too high to climb. "I tried the VA," Tommy explained one afternoon. "Went to counseling, took the medications, did the programs. But nothing stuck. I kept seeing your face in that vehicle, kept hearing you scream when the blast hit. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back there, failing you all over again." James made a decision that would change both their lives. "I'm getting you into the best PTSD program in the country," he announced. "And once you're ready, I want you to consider something." "What?" "Working here. With me. We need patient advocates, veterans who can relate to what our patients are going through, who can bridge the gap between the medical staff and the wounded warriors we treat. You saved my life once, Tommy. Now let me help you save others." The proposal seemed impossible at first. Tommy was a high school graduate who had spent the last 8 years spiraling through homelessness and addiction. But James saw something in his friend that Tommy couldn't see in himself. The same courage and determination that had pulled a wounded soldier from a burning vehicle under enemy fire. The recovery process was neither quick nor easy. Tommy spent months in intensive therapy, confronting the demons that had haunted him since Afghanistan. James visited him regularly, sharing his own journey of healing and transformation. "You know what the difference was for me?" James asked during one visit. "I realized that my pain had a purpose. Every time my leg hurt, every time I struggled with the prosthetic, it reminded me why I was fighting to become a doctor. The pain became fuel. But what if I can't do it? Tommy worried. What if I'm too broken? Then you'll be perfect for the job, James replied. Our patients don't need someone who's never been broken. They need someone who's been shattered and found a way to put the pieces back together. 6 months after the shooting, Tommy Rodriguez began his new life as a patient advocate at Walter Reed Medical Center. His first assignment was a 19-year-old Marine who had lost both legs to an IED in Syria. The young man was refusing physical therapy, convinced his life was over. Tommy sat beside his bed, rolled up his sleeve to show the scars from his own war wounds, and began to speak. "Let me tell you about my friend Jimmy," he said. "He lost his leg in Afghanistan, just like you lost yours." But that wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of a better one. The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, the young Marine was participating actively in his rehabilitation, inspired by the story of two childhood friends who had gone to war together, been broken by it, and found a way to use their pain to heal others. Word spread quickly through the hospital about the new patient advocate who spoke the language of combat trauma, who could reach patients that medical professionals couldn't touch. Tommy's caseload grew rapidly, and his success rate was unprecedented. A year later, James stood before a packed auditorium at a medical conference, delivering a keynote address about innovative approaches to veteran care. Beside him, on the stage, sat Tommy, now clean and sober, certified in peer counseling, and widely recognized as one of the most effective patient advocates in the military medical system. "The man sitting next to me saved my life twice," James told the audience. "First, when he pulled me from a burning vehicle in Afghanistan, and second, when he taught me that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about helping broken people become whole again." The two friends had found their mission. James would repair the physical wounds of war, while Tommy would help heal the invisible ones. Together, they created a program that paired recovering veterans with newly wounded soldiers, providing a bridge between medical treatment and psychological healing. Their success stories multiplied. The Marine who had refused to walk learned to run marathons. The soldier with severe PTSD became a counselor for other trauma victims. The veteran who had attempted suicide 3 times became a peer mentor who prevented dozens of others from making the same choice. But perhaps the most profound transformation was in Tommy himself. The man who had spent 8 years convinced he was a failure discovered that his deepest wounds had become his greatest strengths. His experiences with homelessness, addiction, and despair gave him credibility with patients that no medical degree could provide. "I used to think my pain was pointless," Tommy reflected during one of their regular coffee meetings. "I thought it was punishment for failing you, for surviving when others didn't. But now I understand that it was preparation. Every dark night, every moment I wanted to give up, it was all preparing me for this." James nodded, understanding completely. That's the secret, isn't it? The things that break us don't have to define us. They can refine us instead. 5 years after Tommy's near-death experience, the two friends were recognized at a White House ceremony for their innovative veteran care program. As they stood together on the South Lawn, James in his dress uniform with his Purple Heart, and Tommy wearing his program coordinator badge with pride, they represented something powerful, proof that the worst moments of our lives can become the foundation for our greatest achievements. The program they had created together was being implemented in military hospitals across the country. Hundreds of veterans had found new purpose as peer counselors, patient advocates, and healing partners. The brotherhood forged in combat had been transformed into a brotherhood of healing. During the ceremony, Tommy was asked to address the audience of military families, medical professionals, and government officials. He stood at the podium, no longer the broken man who had arrived bleeding on an operating table, but someone who had discovered that his scars were not marks of defeat, but symbols of survival and strength. "I want to tell you about the day I almost died," he began. "Not the day I was shot in that alley, but the day years earlier when I gave up on myself. I had convinced myself that I was worthless, that my pain served no purpose, that the world would be better off without me." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "But my friend James, Dr. Mitchell, he saw something in me that I couldn't see. He saw that my wounds could become weapons against despair. He saw that my experience with darkness could become a light for others lost in their own shadows." Tommy looked directly at James, who sat in the front row with tears in his eyes. "He saved my life in that operating room. But more importantly, he taught me how to save my own life, and then how to help others save theirs." The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for their program or their individual achievements. It was for the recognition that healing is not a solitary journey, that sometimes we need someone else to show us how strong we really are, and that the most powerful medicine is often not found in any hospital, but in the connections we forge with one another. Later that evening, as the ceremony wound down, James and Tommy found themselves alone on the White House balcony, looking out over the city they had both served in different ways. "You know what I think about sometimes?" James asked. "That morning in Afghanistan. If I could go back and change it, prevent the explosion, keep my leg." "You wouldn't," Tommy finished for him. "Because then none of this would have happened. All those soldiers we've helped, all the lives we've saved together, none of that would exist." James nodded. "The blast that took my leg gave me my purpose. Your struggles with PTSD gave you the tools to help others fight the same battles. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the reason we were put on this earth." "Two broken soldiers," Tommy mused, "who found out they were stronger together than either one ever was alone." As they stood there in the gathering darkness, two friends who had been forged by fire and refined by suffering, they understood a truth that would guide the rest of their lives, that healing is not about forgetting the pain, but about transforming it into something that can help others find their way home. The soldier who lost his leg had become the doctor who saved lives. The veteran who nearly lost himself had become the guide who helped others find their purpose. And together, they had proved that sometimes the people we're meant to save are the ones who end up saving us. In the end, the explosion that nearly killed them both became the foundation for saving hundreds of others. Because sometimes, the moment everything falls apart is actually the moment everything begins to fall into place. And sometimes, the brother who pulls you from the wreckage is the same one who teaches you that scars can be beautiful when they tell a story of survival, strength, and the unbreakable bonds that turn pain into purpose. What if your greatest wound is actually your greatest gift? What if the thing that broke you is the very thing the world needs you to be strong enough to heal? Sometimes we don't realize we're heroes until someone else shows us how to see our scars as medals of honor.